the glittering world of wealth and high expectations, Ivy had always been the daughter of the city's wealthiest hotel magnate. Life for her was a performance, with each public outing a carefully choreographed event of perfection. Her appearance was polished, her reputation unblemished, and her image widely known. But beneath the facade, Ivy struggled with a constant unease. No one knew who she was. They only saw her as an extension of her family's wealth. When her father announced they'd be relocating to the quiet coastal town of Willow Creek, Ivy felt a glimmer of hope. Here, away from the city's pressure, she could finally shed her public identity. For the first time in years, she wouldn't be Ivy, the heiress. She could just be herself. But a quiet life in an unassuming town didn't come without challenges, and Ivy quickly realized that people's perceptions didn't vanish with geography. So Ivy devised a plan. She'd wear a scarf that covered the lower half of her face when in public. It was subtle but effective. For once, she felt free from the endless attention. With her appearance hidden, people might get to know her as a person, not as a brand. On her first day at Willow Creek High, Ivy entered the school with her scarf on, her nerves jangling. She passed through the crowded hallways, hoping to go unnoticed. At first, her plan seemed to work. Students cast a few curious glances her way, but no one approached her. She blended in. Her first class was art, and she sat quietly at a back table. The teacher, Mr. Jacobs, called her name during the roll call. "Ivy Grant?" he asked, scanning the room. Ivy raised her hand with a nod, relieved he didn't make a spectacle of her. She wanted nothing more than to fade into the background. At lunch, Ivy found a secluded corner in the courtyard. She kept her head down, slowly eating her sandwich and watching the other students mingle. She wanted to join them but couldn't shake the fear that someone might recognize her, or worse, judge her for who her family was. As days passed, Ivy's scarf kept people at bay, but it also kept her isolated, with no one trying to get close to her. She was lonely, but it was a loneliness she'd chosen. It was better than the alternative, the same empty attention she'd always endured. However, not everyone was content with Ivy's mysterious presence. Tasha, the daughter of Willow Creek's mayor, immediately felt threatened by Ivy. Tasha was the unofficial queen of the school, always surrounded by a circle of friends. When she noticed Ivy sitting alone and shrouded in mystery, it irritated her. Tasha couldn't understand why someone would want to hide their face unless they had something to be ashamed of. One afternoon, Tasha and her friends approached Ivy during lunch. With her arms crossed and a smug grin, Tasha leaned forward. "So, the mystery girl speaks at last. Why the scarf? Hiding something?" Tasha sneered, her tone mocking. Ivy looked up, her voice calm. "It's just my choice. I don't need to explain myself." "Oh, come on," Tasha pressed. "Are you hiding a scar? Or are you just too afraid to show your real face? Maybe you don't belong here at all." The words stung, but Ivy refused to give Tasha the reaction she wanted. She took a deep breath and stayed silent, hoping Tasha would lose interest. But Tasha wasn't finished. "I bet you're just trying to look mysterious." Well, no one here is impressed. Just then a voice interrupted. "Tasha, back off." Ivy turned to see a boy standing nearby, his gaze steady and kind. His name was Theo, a quiet student known for his thoughtful nature and love of books. "Not everyone wants attention. Maybe you should respect that." Tasha rolled her eyes and stormed off, but Ivy couldn't hide her relief. After she left, Ivy turned to Theo, surprised by his kindness. "Thank you," she said softly. "I didn't expect anyone to stand up for me." "No problem," Theo replied with a smile. "Everyone deserves respect, whether they wear a scarf or not. If you want to sit here, I don't mind the company." As they talked, Ivy felt something she hadn't felt in years, a genuine connection. Theo asked her about her interests and her dreams, not once prying about her family. Over time, their friendship blossomed, and Ivy felt comfortable around him, like she could finally breathe. But her disguise wouldn't remain unnoticed forever. One evening, her father announced that he'd invited local business leaders and their families to a charity event. The idea of attending filled Ivy with dread, knowing that people might recognize her and link her to her family's wealth. On the night of the event, Ivy wore her scarf and tried to keep a low profile. But as she entered the grand ballroom, she spotted a familiar face, Theo. He was there with his parents, looking just as surprised to see her. Theo walked up to her, confusion in his eyes. "Ivy, I didn't realize. Is this your family's event?" Reluctantly, Ivy nodded. "Yes. I didn't want you to find out this way, I just didn't want to be known as someone I'm not. Theo took a deep breath, absorbing the revelation. Ivy, I don't care who your family is, I care about who you are. And if wearing that scarf helps you feel like yourself, then I think it's a good choice. His words filled Ivy with warmth, and she realized she didn't need the scarf to be herself, not with people who genuinely cared. As the night went on, she decided to let Theo and maybe others see her, not as the billionaire's daughter, but simply as Ivy. And from that moment on, Ivy knew she could be herself without the mask. It was a new beginning, one she'd waited for her whole life. As the evening wound down, Ivy stood on the terrace overlooking the quiet town, the scarf slipping from her fingers and catching in the gentle breeze. She looked out feeling both vulnerable and free, her heart light with the knowledge that at last she was truly seen, not for her family name or the wealth she'd hidden behind, but for who she was beneath it all. At that moment, she understood that the real gift wasn't in disguising herself from the world, but in finding those who cherished her precisely as she was. Theo joined her, their silent understanding bridging the gap between their worlds, and Ivy smiled, a genuine, unguarded smile, knowing she'd finally found where she belonged. Ivy's courageous decision to reveal her true self to Theo and her friends transformed her relationships, allowing her to experience genuine connections for the first time. The bonds she formed, no longer based on pretense, brought her a profound sense of belonging and acceptance. Through her journey, Ivy discovered that authenticity held far more value than the image she'd once guarded, ultimately leading her to a life of deeper meaning and happiness.